Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending from where you're joining us today. My name is Marlena Hutfels, and I'm working for the advisory project Leading Urban Climate Action at GIZ, and I'm happy to moderate today's session for you. So it's great to have you all on board for today's event on innovative finance solutions to fund and implement urgent climate action. And just to start with a quick note on some housekeeping, as always, please note that this event will be recorded and will later be posted on the Daring Cities portal via Wova. And as this is supposed to be an interactive workshop, you will be able to unmute your mics later on and open your cameras as you wish. So during the work sessions, please do so. But as always, please make sure to mute your mics if you're not speaking. And of course, you can use the chat boxes if there are any questions or informations that you would like to share. But having said that, let us just jump right into our workshop. As you know, today's event focuses on innovative finance solutions to fund and implement urgent climate action. And I don't have to tell you that cities and local governments are key players for bold climate actions that is so urgently needed, but that access to finance is often the sticking point. And some uncertainties might remain with using some innovative instruments and approaches. So that's why today we are bringing city representatives together to share their questions and experience from project preparation to implementation. And we will discuss and learn about different platforms and opportunities for project preparation. And also we will hear from projects that are already in the phase of implementation and learn about financing instruments. As you can see from the agenda, we will shortly start with a welcome speech by Nick Hill from Climate Kick, and afterwards we will go into group discussions depending on the stage of the project, and I will explain a bit about that later on. But first, let us start with Nick Hill and let me hand over the floor to you.
Thanks, Marlena, and a warm welcome from my end as well. The need for innovative finance is something that we are well aware of, but to welcome you all and set the scene or the tone of this discussion, let me present a few key points that my organization is currently putting front, left, and center at the heart of this EU Cities mission that some of you might have heard of. So Climate Kick is an innovation network based in Europe with over 400 actors from varied sectors, from research institutes to local governments to nonprofits and think tanks. And we are also coordinating this Net Zero Cities mission platform, as we are calling it, which is intended to provide over 112 cities EU-wide with tools and resources and expertise that will help in their ambition towards net neutrality, climate neutrality. And the title that I've put here is Financing the Ambition, which also aligns with what we are talking about. And just a few key stats to get us started, just to make us all reiterate and make us aware of what is the scale of emergency, climate emergency and crisis that we're looking at. So this graph shows the glaring gap between some of the current trajectories of emissions within Europe, and we can clearly see that the current projections and trajectories are only going to get us to 50% reductions by 2030, which is the target that the mission has set, and which leads us to this glaring innovation challenge, which we are all hoping innovation and finance could help bridge. And to achieve these ambitions, the mandate for us to decarbonize at 6 times faster than the global average, which is quite a radical pathway to achieve. And as it is true for Europe, it is also true globally. You might all be aware that IPCC has already sounded the code red last year, which means even with current policies and pledges and targets, we are only looking at a global scenario of warming between 2.5 to 3.5 degrees, which is, as we are all aware, is going to be catastrophic. And getting to that 1.5 degrees world is going to demand rapidly closing this relevance gap, as we like to call it. And some of the key challenges, that I would like us to address through this conversation is, of course, the urgency, as I mentioned, and it would be remiss not to mention the current war that's unfolding at Europe's doorsteps that has led to a cascade of negative impacts, along with the climate crisis, the energy crisis. So the climate emergency is here, and of course, let's think about how financial instruments and financial innovation can then step up to close that gap. And also the scale of the finance or the capital that's needed. One study estimates that Europe currently needs about 28 trillion of euros, which is a huge number to achieve. And of course, looking at the public sector finances are still minuscule compared to the capital requirements that's needed. One study also suggests that the global market for green bonds finally reached 1 trillion last year. So we are getting there, but we are still quite slow. So we of course need to make that transition quite accelerated and quite rapid. And also there's a lot of governments now talking about the leveling up agenda, which means how do we not leave communities or citizens that are historically left behind? How do we achieve or bring them into this journey towards climate neutrality through this so-called just transition agenda? So that's also one of the key challenges. And finally, complexity of cities. We're all cities professionals, and we like to see cities as systems of systems, which means it's a system of many interconnected components, be it actors, be it governance setups, be it policies, be it financial instruments. And the challenge now for us is how do we address this complexity with the kind of projects and interventions and plans and agendas that we're looking to operationalize in the next few years. And to address this, as I said, the EU launched a set of 5 missions last year. One of it was this climate neutral and smart cities mission, which is trying to bring to bear a host of tools and innovative pathways towards climate neutrality, which will enable these 112 cities to then set some sort of a precedent, and of course share this learning far and wide, so that we can all learn from one another as to how do we close that gap towards climate neutrality by 2030, which is again quite an ambitious target for cities, not just in Europe but worldwide. And we are here to support interested cities that are currently working with us to create a range of learnings that will benefit everyone. And to achieve this, at the core of this approach we are taking, we call it systemic innovation, and which basically means trying to slowly, gradually moving away from a conventional project financing model. So not look at single financing or capital deployment for single or discrete projects, but how do we move that thinking to a more portfolio finance model, where we are looking at financing a range of projects and not just looking at each project individually, but try and identify and highlight what are those interconnections or missing gaps between each of these projects. And these gaps could not just be technical, which is what we call these so-called levers of change, which means we not only have to act on technology, but also on participation, on governance, on policy, on regulation, and so on. So how do we move from that incremental to transformational model using a whole host of these change levers? And looking at the solution side, and I'll be brief here, is an innovative process that we are bringing to bear called investment planning. And of course, by no means it's a new approach, but what we observe is cities have since over a decade been engaged in creating these climate action plans, but we still observe what's missing there is a very dedicated focus to financial planning. So starting from left to right, we are engaged in trying to support cities with identifying what is that exact cost of projects or connected projects, as I mentioned, that we need to raise capital for through a range of financial instruments, but also raising capabilities from the public sector so that they can engage in a much more productive and impactful manner with the private sector as well through this citywide portfolio, as I mentioned, so that they can set in motion these so-called impact pathways so that we are thinking of not just climate mitigation or GHG reduction pathways, but also a whole host of co-benefits like livability, air quality improvement, social impacts, social inclusion, etc., so that both financial impacts and social impacts go hand in hand. And of course, on the left-hand side, we are also looking at trying to embed a long-term approach to investment planning. And of course, as city governments, we are all aware, we are wired to think in a more operational or budgetary terms, be it revenue, OPEX, CAPEX, etc. But how do we take a longer term, say 10-year timeline, and use that as a starting point to then create a holistic planning process. And of course, it's going to involve a lot of multi-stakeholder participation, because one estimate suggests cities only control about 40% of the assets and infrastructure. So how do we actually address that 60% that's still left? And that is, of course, at the heart of that approach lies how does investment planning not become a technocratic agenda, but a democratic one, which then acts as a catalyst for creating a whole host of blended finance models. And lastly, we are envisioning that as an iterative process to learn from, which means we are not looking at it as a rigid set and forget plan, but actually use that plan as a constant and ongoing and continuous engagement with a range of stakeholders that we can continuously learn from and learn with. And there's just the last slide showing how some of this interlinking between an action plan and investment plan could happen. As I said, starting with a portfolio of projects that, again, recognizes all of the multiple sectors, be it energy, be it transport, be it waste, looking at detailed creating baselines and inventories that help cities prioritize which of the emission domains they would like to act on, trying to co-create these impact pathways so that we understand which of these impacts are going to unfold. Is it in the next 2 years? Is it 4 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? So that we can have that eye on the ball, if you will, to then work towards long-term co-benefits and impacts. And finally, once we have this collection of actions, what is that cost to the city? And of course, using that economic model to then create very strong arguments for a whole host of actors to step in, be it the philanthropic funding, be it private sector funding, be it venture capital, etc. Also tying it closely with the kind of risks that some of these investor institutions are looking at, and try and continuously mitigate based on the impact metrics and decision making that is happening continuously. So, and I'll stop there. Just again, there's a lot of thinking that sits behind some of those diagrams that I presented, and I'm happy to have follow-up conversations as needed. There are multiple ways you can get in touch or reach Net Zero Cities, and of course, I'm really looking forward to how some of these principles are also applied globally in the range of approaches we are going to look at today. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Marilena.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you so much for these introductory words and setting the scene for us. And we will now have the opportunity to split into two breakout groups, one that is focusing rather on the early stage projects and the other on more mature projects. But I will give you a short overview. And just as a reminder, these groups are really a space for you to discuss on approaches taken, exploring what worked well and why it did. And of course, as the audience, you will also be able to afterwards share your experiences and raise questions in joining one of them. So on the one hand, we have the group 1 on project preparation. There you will get to know some project preparation facilities. This session will be moderated by Sayuri Chetty from ICLEI Africa. And you can hear from experiences from Uganda, Indonesia, and Portugal, learning about the GAP Fund, for instance, C40, CFF, or the EU City Facility. In this group, we will focus, as I said, rather on the early stage projects. So we look at very sensitive stage where the design and the conceptualization of climate action starts, of course, based on the city's priorities and planning processes. And as you might know, this stage, cities might face a variety of challenges due to limited technical and financial capacities to conduct studies to assess the viability of their projects. And as you might know, project preparation facilities like the ones you will get to learn more about can support cities in this early stage with, for instance, services like the preparation of pre-feasibility studies or feasibility studies, technical and financial analysis and studies, etc. So if you're interested in that stage, please join group 1. And then we also have group 2 that is focusing rather on the later stage of projects, so on the implementation stage. And you will learn more about the use or exchange on the use of innovative financial mechanisms. This session will be moderated by Mary Jane Alvarez from ICLEI Southeast Asia. And you will hear from cities from India and Uganda. And just as a brief reminder, this focus on rather mature projects where we are in the pre-implementation and implementation stages. So the project is already able to execute steps to securing finance and procure constructions and operational service. But of course, the path to mobilize capital, be that public or private, can often be a challenge for subnational governments. And that might start with identifying even the most suitable financial mechanisms. So we there want to look at innovative financial instruments that may help to mobilize greater investments. So if you're interested in that stage, please join breakout group 2 now. And afterwards, we will get you back in the plenary and then hear from each other, of course, so you won't miss any of the great insights. And with that, I would leave you to the breakout groups and have fun and great discussions there. I hope you had some great discussions in the breakout groups. And I would now like to ask the two rapporteurs or the moderators from each group to report back. Sayuri, may I ask you to start reporting back from breakout group 1 that focused on project preparation?
Sure. Thank you very much, Marilena. Maybe just to also say apologies. We were right in the midst of discussions and we did not have enough time eventually to get to everything we wanted to. And apologies to the participants for not getting to all your questions and comments. But yeah, I do invite you to engage with us after this and we'll try our best to answer some of those questions. Anyways, I think we had 3 very good presentations. Some interesting discussions came out from each of these. The first, just to touch on the key takeaways from our first presenter, who talked about a municipal solid waste project, was that it's really important to have passionate people leading these kind of projects. So we have to have proactiveness, we have to have an organized approach to how we approach project preparation. And it really stems from passion over technical expertise. That was one thing that came out very strongly. The other is leverage your neighboring cities. Use a joint approach to streamline your project proposals and make use of joining resources in terms of financial resources and human resources to get the best possible proposal that you can get. And I think this also links very well to Nikhil's presentation earlier, where he set the scene and he said, you know, it's moving from now a portfolio-based approach to providing funding for projects rather than individual projects. So that was some of the things that we picked out from there. Our second speaker, who talked about an electrification bus project, really honed down on understanding the technology of what you're trying to get funding for or technical assistance for. And along with understanding your technology, it's important to also understand the financial implications of it. So how is the financial model going to look like? What market assessments do you need to conduct beforehand? And I think also this came out across the three presentations that understand first your data that you have, whether it's a waste characterization study that you need to do or market assessment that you need to do. It's really important that you have these baseline data that you can work with. Our last speaker talked about a community solar project, and this also was very interesting in that he spoke about production chain transformation and trying to leverage innovation where we can by using new public procurement initiatives, but also tapping into some of the readily available resources like renewable energy, for example, that we know already is bankable in the traditional sense. So that's, and another thing is that really it's important to have your projects integrated into plans such as your climate action plans or your NDCs, where it's really linked to a broader commitment for your city. So those are some of the key insights. I hope I captured the essence of these presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sayuri, for that great wrap up. I think that gave some very good insights. And now handing over to Mary Jane from the second breakout group that focused more on innovative finance mechanisms. Happy to hear what you discussed.
Yeah, good afternoon again, everyone. So for group 2, we were able to hear experiences of projects that are already in the implementation phase and showcase the financing instruments they used, including the some challenges, difficulties, and we do have interesting proposals and projects from Indore, India, and the experiences of a project in Kampala, Uganda. So first up for the project in Indore, India, it talks about the roles of the municipalities in India and how the different sources of revenues are being used to finance programs and projects to deliver services in the community. And then we zero in on the proposal of our presenter to issue green bonds in order to finance solar projects in the region. So we were able to talk about the different opportunities that are brought about by the use of the green bond. So first up, there's a mention that the citizen will be benefited by ones of the green bonds because there will be a better return than the normal returns of other money market. Then the issuance of green bonds will also support the acceleration of sustainable energy financing, and that green bonds will be able to give international recognition, appreciation, and enhance the brand image, not just of the municipality, but of the whole country in general. And then the issuance of the green bonds would the moving forward towards the breaking of new and innovative. And then there is a point taken that Indore, India is one of the first municipality in India that was able to make use of this financing instrument. So a big hands to that for our LGUs in Indore, India. And then the next project that we were able to discuss in our group is run in Kampala, Uganda. It's titled Program on Integrated Local Finances for Sustainable Urban Development. It's a 4-year program funded by the European Commission, which helps the area to improve its municipal finance, innovate and integrate urban development, and foster linkages with relevant agencies and the overall urban policy in India. So I think the one key takeaway that we were able to discuss is that unlocking local finance is a long-term process. That's why the project is really targeting on assisting the metropolitan area to unlock and address the challenges towards it. But I think one key points that our presenter was able to discuss, to share, is that in order for any project to access is the proponent should be able to present clearly the case in the area. If we can present the case why we need the project to be implemented in the area, if there are concrete data to help justify the need for the project, then that would really help a lot for the proponents to access any funding from the donor international agencies. I hope I was also able to capture the discussions and presentations, presentations from our esteemed presenters.
Thank you very much, Mary Jane, for this wrap up of the second breakout group. And it's great to hear that all of you seem to have so fruitful and lively discussions during today's workshop. I think that was the aim. And thank you, of course, also to all of the speakers that gave input today and that we were able to learn from, but of course also everyone in the audience. And sorry if there was not enough time for you to discuss all the questions and gave all the inputs. As Cecilia has already mentioned, all the questions are captured, of course, and will be answered in the afterwards. And yeah, I think from hearing the reporting back, I think we were all able to learn a lot from each other, from each other's experiences, and that there are a lot of challenges at all of the stages, but also a lot of good experiences that we can, of course, learn from. And yeah, I hope you had the chance to gain insights about how to best access PPFs and what to take into account for a successful project preparation on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, that you were able to learn about innovative finance mechanisms and how to best make use of them. And I think that that's it from my side. And thank you all for joining today's event, and enjoy the rest of this year's Daring Cities. Thank you.